Hey girls and guys, welcome to part 4 of our Ventuz Quick Start tutorial. In this part we are going to learning about more nodes. We will create the first interaction. That means we are going to build some nice buttons around this circle menu or graphical user interface what we built in part 3. So let's jump right in. As you remember, in the last part we work here in just only one layer, and we will also do that at least for now. So we have here our background. If I block it with Control B, right? So this is basically what we built with Ventuz geometry only, with a lot of circles and stuff like that, right? So let's go on and let me show you how I would start to build a button here. So let's bring that first back to the center, right? So that we don't have any rotation here on my root axis, because that's much more easy to work with. Because later on, if everything is nicely aligned there, we can put it in another perspective, or we can play with cameras as well. So let's go on and let's keep this root axis, let's keep that root axis, the root axis, but let's give her another name. Let's give her another name and let's call it GUI circle. Okay, so now I close that down. What I will do next, I use axis and I will start to use a rounded rectangle. And this rounded rectangle obviously is now in the center. So let's bring that out to this direction. And let's bring up the size. So we make it, let's say 6. And maybe we make it 2 in the height. Yeah, that could be a nice button, why not? So also quickly with that rounded rectangle, like with every node in Ventuz, you have a couple of properties here, right? So you have the rounding value, or how actually they call it, the rounded size, exactly. So let's bring that to 0.5, something like that. Okay. So what else we need? We need a button, need to have some text, right? So let's introduce a new node, and this is our text node. Also remember, if you are new to Ventuz, please go here to View and open your toolbox. Then you have it, you can place it wherever you want. You also can have it floating, or if you have 2 screens, you can move it to another screen. That's much more effective to work in Ventuz. So under the toolbox, you go to the category topic text, and here we have a 3D text, the text 2D, text style 2D, text effects, and text provider. So I close this for now because I just can work on one screen. At least for this tutorial, for the recording. So let's add another text node. So I put axis first and I add a text. So I just type text, and then he asked me, what do you want to have, a 3D text or a 2D text? For our purpose, a 2D text is okay. The 3D text, we can go into that in another tutorial. Just try it out. It's working basically same like 2D text, except you can give a 3D text a depth, a bevel, and stuff like that, right? So I add that 2D text here behind my axis, and then Ventuz asked me, what do you want to use? You want to use a block text, a scroll text, or enriched block text? So we are starting with the easy one, with the block text. So add this, and now we can see here already we added here our text node. Now it's white on white, yeah, because we did not assign any color. So just let's put in some color. Let's use a solid color, and let's add that, and let's change the color here to black for now. Okay, now we can see here we have our button, or our backdrop, that white rectangle, and we have our text. So now I want that this text is always centered. Doesn't matter how many characters that text has. So let's go into the text node, and let's check what we can do. This is our 2D text node, the texture text node basically. So here we can change the style, right? So plain or hard shadow or neon glow. So these are all things these are presets, but with the 2D text style node, you also can create more of your text effects, let's call it like that. So let's bring it back to plain, and let's check what else we can do here, right? So this values, so this is actually, this orange point means that this value, the text input, is coming here from our block text node, right? So this is our content node here. So let's select our content node, our block text node, and here we can see we have much more options for text. That means here we are able to change the font, right? The default font. Also here Ventuz is coming with a couple of presets here. But just to let you know quickly, if you have a special font, right, you just can change your font here under edit. Yeah? If you go to edit, then Ventuz is basically reading out all the existing fonts on your Windows system. Yeah? If you have installed some additional fonts, and Ventuz is able to work with these fonts, right, then they will appear here, right? So here you can see now we have many different fonts. If I, whatever, Candera Light, right, then you can see a preview down here how that font will look like. Or here normal, Comic Sans, stuff like that. So for example, let's use this Comic Sans now. If I want to make this Comic Sans as the default font, yeah, that means whenever I drag and drop in a new text node, then this will be the default font, or the preset default will use then that normal Comic Sans, yeah, or if I make it bold or whatever. So if I want to save that, you can see if I change here something, I have that little star here. If I want to change something, I just have to press here this little save disk, and now my Comic Sans normal is now my new default font, right? So if I press OK, project settings saved, that's OK. And now we can see, now Ventuz is using here already that Comic Sans. So let's go on. So this is about the fonts, right? You also can assign much more fonts. Yeah, you just have to type in new names in your preset window, like I showed you before. And then you can say, okay, the headlines are all whatever bold. All my paragraphs or sublines, they are light or normal, not bold, right? So this is pretty much how it works. So here we have a couple of things. I think the most important for the quick start is the text alignment, right? And the line alignment. So the text alignment basically means where it should be, where the text should be aligned on top of your text box, or on the bottom, or on the center, right? So here we have it on top. That's okay for now. The line alignment is basically the left or right or the centered one, right? So this is basically what we want to put here to center. And now we can see already, once we put the line alignment, we change that value to center, then our block text is already in the center of our rectangle. So let's do the same now with our basically Y alignment, right? So that means if I put that to center, then I can make sure that the text is always centered relative to my rectangle. Yeah? So this is basically the position of my white rectangle, and I did not change here any X, Y, or Z values, right? So of course, if I move this, then we will offset that text. And let's give it quickly another color. Let's make it blue or so, exactly, because else it looks that it disappears. But of course, it's there. The text is there, right? Okay. So this is the simple part, and also the other things won't be difficult. So what I want to do now, I want to be able that if I click with my mouse onto this button, yeah, that I then get a kind of effect. So the first effect what I want to have, I want that when I click with my mouse on this button, then that my button makes then a little effect like this, right? Like a click effect basically. And I can do that, or I mostly do that click effect with my scaling factor, right, on a main axis. Let's call this guy here button. Okay. And how we do that now? So you remember we have the mover. We in the last part I showed you that movers to make this rotation basically. Now I will use also a mover, but this mover should not rotate anything. This mover just should say, if I press this button, so that means, let's start that, let's use that mover, let's bring it in. And I want to tell this mover now, hey, if event is coming, right? That means, and this event is, I click with my mouse onto this button, then please running from the scaling factor 1 down to whatever 0.8 or 0.9 and then back to 1. Yeah? So, and this is then basically my click effect, right? So let's do that. So let's directly bind my scaling factor to the mover. So, and what's happening now? I remember the default value of the mover is he's running from minimum to maximum and back, and the minimum default is -1 and the maximum is 1. So I know now my minimum should be 0.9, for example, and my maximum is 1. So now we can already see here we have that little kind of click effect, but a couple of things we have to change. So it's far too slow, yeah? So let's bring the time down to maybe 0.5. That's still a bit too slow, so let's make it 0.25. That's okay, but of course I don't want that this effect is running in a loop, right? So I want that this effect is basically running in a, just a one shot. I just want to trigger this event one time when I click with my mouse on this button, right? So you remember, no, I think I showed you in the last one. So we have here under the mode, the absolute means run in a loop always, but we want to use that one shot, right? So with that one shot, I can use now my nudge method. If I click that, we have now the opposite direction, right? Because he is running now from minimum to maximum and back. So I have to change that. I say my minimum is 1 and my maximum is 0.9, right? And now I press nudge again, and now we have the right direction. So this is now already basically our click effect, right? Last thing what I have to do, I have to tell Ventuz, say, you guy, you nudge, you get triggered from a mouse click here, right? Or from a touch screen tab, or from a, not sure, for example, our Opti2 solution, right? So let's introduce now our first interactive node. So for this, I first want to open our toolbox. And in this toolbox, we have somewhere, we have here something like interaction, exactly. And here under interaction, you can find all that interactive nodes. Yeah, the touch button is a very simple one, and that's exactly the one what we will use. Then we have the touch translation node. If you want to move some geometries, right, we have the touch orbit to rotate some 3D model, some cube or whatever, and a couple of other interactive nodes, right? So let's close that again, and I will, before I close it, let's drag and drop in here our touch button. And let's put this touch button exactly here in front of our rectangle and in front of our text. So what this touch button is doing, this touch button is listening now to everything, all the geometries behind, right? So this rounded rectangle, let's call it, let's keep this name. So my touch button will now react to, not react, actually my touch button will react now, that's right, but my touch button actually will react, yeah, that's totally right what I say, will react to everything, to every interaction what is happening on this geometries behind, yeah. I also put the text behind because text in Ventuz is also treated like a geometry, right? So we have here our inputs and we have our outputs, and much more important or much more interesting with our interactive nodes are the outputs, right? Because we want to, they are creating interaction. So let's select here now our interactive touch button, and if I go with my mouse now into this area, we see here in this area we see nothing happening, right? First, nothing happening, but if I go with my mouse over this button what I created, then I get here some events. I get a touch enter, I get a touch leave. If I go with my mouse over, I have also a Boolean here, which tells me, hey, you are inside this interactive area, right? So if I just a little bit here, then you can see that Boolean touch inside tells me, hey, now your mouse or your touch input is over me, right? If I click my left mouse button, I get a single tap, right? So this is the single tap. So let's see what happens here. So, right, every time I press my left mouse button, I get here an event called single tap. So what we have to do now, we have basically to say, hey, this single tap event, when this single tap event is coming, then I want that the input method, that nudge, gets triggered, right? In Ventuz, we have methods that input, the methods we are calling inputs, and the events we are calling outputs. So let's bring in now both nodes, because now I want to have the mover in my content editor, and I also want to have my touch button, right? So I press and hold shift, and then I can select as many nodes as I want, and all the selected nodes will appear then here in my content editor. Okay, so this is also important to know, because now we have to make a binding between my touch button and between my mover, right? So let's do that. So remember what I said, always inputs over outputs. So first the inputs over the outputs. So what do we want to do? We want to have our input nudge, and this input nudge should get triggered from this output single tap, right? From this one. So let's do that, input over output. So I left click, drag and drop my nudge from my mover over my touch button, and then I release the mouse, the left mouse button, and then he asked me, hey, to which of all that events you want to connect me, right? Or you want to make the binding. In that case, we know it's a single tap, so I click single tap, and now we have this binding. So let's see what's happening now. I click my block text, and voila, we are ready. We have already made our first logic, interactive logic, right? So easy like that, right? So let's check again. Let's have our mover. Before I had to click it here manually, but now if I select my mover, if I left click on my button, then we get this nudge event, right? And of course, same like here. So this single tap is now triggering this nudge because we made this binding. If you want to delete some binding, right click on it and then you can delete it. You also can connect to one method. You can connect many events, right? But later more about that. So now we built already our first little button, right? So now let's say, hey, I want to have not just one button, I want to have a couple of buttons, right? So what I could do now, I can copy and paste and copy and paste, but this is actually not the nice way, what I want to suggest. So what we are doing now is, this is a new technique or a new node what I introduced, and this node is called a container, right? So I want to say, hey, everything here, everything from my button axis, all this stuff behind, I want to put into a container, right? So let's do that. Let's to create a container from something existing, right? You just one click, left click onto everything what you want to have in the container, what should be your first node inside this container. You select it and then you make a right click. You hold actually your right mouse button and you move your mouse a little bit slightly, right? And then you get that right click menu from Ventuz, right? So once we have that, we have here a couple of different things, but for now we just talking about the containers. So here we have then the feature what we are looking for, and that's called merge to container. So let's do that. We click it, and now we created our first container, right? So you can see that we are talking about a container. It looks pretty similar to an axis, right? But except that we have here that little arrow showing to the right side, or that little gray triangle, however we call it. To go inside, we actually have to double click this little triangle, and to go outside, we have to double click this arrow showing to the left, right? So go into a container, double click here, go out of a container, double click here, right? You also can see if you are inside in a container, then you have actually here that arrow, right? So this is the way how you can go into a container and out of a container. Quickly about this, so this is now a hierarchy container, okay? So the hierarchy container, you put in the hierarchy to sort and to organize your scene, your complex geometry, right? There is also a content container, right? So if we open here our toolbox, then we say content container. Oh, let's do that again, content. Or let's do it different, let's call it container. Then we see, okay, we have here container info, container output, we have a content container, and we have a hierarchy, okay? So this one here is a hierarchy container. And sometimes we also want to put a lot of content nodes, right? If we build complex logic in the content window, then we also put that into a, let's call it a little black box, right? And then I also can drag and drop here my content container, and here it's actually the same. I double click this little arrow and now I'm inside this container. To go out, I press down here and then I'm back here in my hierarchy, right? But this one is something what we will do later together in more details. So let's go on with our container now, right? So what we build now, we have now our button nicely inside this container, right? So what I could do now, I put axis in front, right? I put X in front, I call it button 1, and now I can copy this one and move that somewhere here, right? And I copy that again, and I move that somewhere here. I copy it again, so let's make it straight. So this is 0, this one we put 3 values up in the y-axis. So then the third one we put obviously 6 up in the y-axis. Then let's use another one, exactly, and this one maybe we put 9, and this one we put somewhere here, right? So this could be one way how you can create easy a couple of different buttons, because now you know all these containers have exactly the same logic inside. We can click it, we can do it, and we can use that. Now another thing what is very important, because I mean what we are doing with containers, we actually build a kind of our own nodes, right? So let's delete all these guys, because let's say we have here, we work now with our button 1, right? So also let's delete this axis, that's okay. And if I select my button, yeah, if I go inside, we know now, hey, okay, I have here my axis, I have here the logic, the interaction that when I click, then I get that little click effect, right? I have my text, I have my color. So if I have a lot of buttons later on, right? If I copy all these buttons one by one by one, then it would be, that means I have to go inside every button. Yeah, let's do it again quickly. Let's say I have 2 buttons, but of course, mostly you will have much more than just 2 buttons, right? So let's say this is my button 1, and here is my button 2. And now let's say, okay, my button 1 should have the text, should have the text button 1, right? So the text you can add actually here in your block text, right? There is that value text, and once you just change that, then you change the names of the button basically, right? And I say, hey, okay, this is okay, but all good. After that, you are going into the button 2, and then you have to go here into the text, and you have to have to change the text here, and this one you have to call button 2. And now you can imagine if you have 10 or 20 or 100 buttons, right? This would be very, very difficult to go all that clicks and double clicks into the containers, change something. So there is a way, new technique, important in Ventuz, where we basically can expose values, right? And we will go into this after a short break, and I will be back with you in a couple of minutes. Okay, like we said, what we are doing now, we are creating our own nodes, right? So if we click this button, what we create, our button container, we can see we have here actually no inputs and no outputs. So now I will show you how we can create that. For this, we are going into our button container. And here I want to say, of course, what I want to be able to change my text from outside, right? Without always going into the container. So I go to my text node, and I go then here to my block text node. And here you can see all these values. They have that little square, right? If I click this square once, then it gets green. If I go out of my container now again, now we can see we have here now, we have exposed this value. That means if I change now here anything to say hello, you, and I press enter, then we can change this value of the text inside, right? So let's go back in, because sometimes, you know, I want to be able to configure this a little bit more, to say I want to call it a button text, for example, right? So let's go inside. So if I click now my text node again, and I not just one click, I double click. Yeah, here you can also see it, that the mouse info tells me if you double click or double click to edit. So I double click it, and then we have here our little window where we then can change our name, our category, our tab page, and so on. So let's uncheck it, inherit, and let's call it button text, right? And we put that maybe under the category button, and let's press OK. If we go outside again, now we click our container, we see here now we have the category button, and we call it actually our button text. Yeah, it's here button text, but he did not tell it here, so why not? Let's check that. Let's go here, let's go to our text node again. Let's double click it. Here it's actually button text. Okay, I don't actually know why this is now. Let's put it together. Maybe that changed something. Let's go back out, select that, no. Okay, I'm not sure, maybe this could be a bug. Anyway, not too important right now. Let's check again, maybe I did something wrong. So where we are here, text, sorry, not here, let's double click. Button text, category, button, description, inherit, no, it's all good. Let's put it back. Let's put that back. Let's check it now. Still text. Anyway, don't worry about it now. That's a little detail, but I will figure that out. I try to figure that out. Maybe it's really a little bug in this version. Can happen sometimes. Okay, let's go on. So we have now our text exposed, right? What more we want to be able to exchange from outside? I think we should be able to exchange our text color from outside. So I do the same here. Let's double click. Let's put it into the category button that we have all in the same category, and let's call that here text color, and let's click OK, and let's go outside and let's see what's happening here. Yeah, he is taking it over, the text color. Okay, that's okay. What else we want to have outside? For now, I also want to be able to change the color maybe of my rectangle, right, of my background, of the button geometry. So let's put a solid color in front of my rectangle, and also let's expose that, and let's call that button color, and let's uncheck this one, and let's call that button, sorry, that's the category button. Let's press OK. Let's check outside. Now we have nicely sorted here the category button. We can change our text color from outside now, to red or for whatever we want. We are able to change our button color itself, right? To change it to gray or to blue or whatever we want, right? So let's actually bring that a little bit into our maybe to direction of our circle menu, and let's see what color would fit here. White or maybe black. Let's use black. And now I'm pretty happy with my button, right? So now I have access to all my important input values because I exposed it. So, and with this one, I never have to go into my node again to change something, right? So this makes it much more easy now and saves you time to change quickly something from outside. So I call that button 1, or I can call that whatever, scene 1 for whatever I want to be controlled later with this button, right? Let's say maybe I want to control the movie, so I will call it movie 1, right? And then I copy this guy and I bring it down here, and I give the second button is then my movie 2, right? So this is the way how you would create your own nodes, because now you see already we created already a node with 3 inputs. Yes, it's a container, but we are able now to control the inputs. Last thing, what I also want to do, I want to be able to create an output, right? So what do I want to do with my output? Of course, later on, I want to be able, if I click my movie button, I want, for example, that this circle disappears, right? And a movie player appears, right? Because I want to be able to control with this button, I want to be able to start my movie 1, right? So, and for this, we also need an output, because the other logic, what we will build in the next couple of tutorials, will also have things like events and methods, right? Animations will be a very big part in the next tutorial. So let's say in the next tutorial, if I press my movie button, I want to say that this circle disappears, or we move it to the right, or we make it smaller, or whatever. And after this circle is disappeared, I want to be able to start an animation, and this animation is showing then my movie, right? So for this, we need a trigger. That means we need to get an output here, so let's do that. And this output is actually coming from my single tab, right? So when I click here, then I get my single tab. So that means I also want to be able to have access from outside to my single tab. So I double click here, and I leave everything how it is. I say okay. I go outside again, and now voila, we have here our control output single tab. If I click here, then we have here our output, and this output later on I can bind to more containers, which we will build in the next couple of sessions, right? So this is I think pretty much for today, for this tutorial. Go on, learn, play around, build your own containers, expose your values, build your own little button, right? You can make much more. You can say change the color when I press here, right? So not just that little scaling effect with the mover, also find ways, try out, play, and really experiment with Ventuz, with all that nodes, to say, okay, if I click this button, I also want that I have a quick white flash, or maybe I get a nice little effect outside which getting red, yeah, right? So for example, just to give you a little idea that you can play and exercise and develop by yourself. So what I would do then maybe is I copy that color one time more behind, and I say, okay, this color should be, let's bring that a bit more inside, and we can see more. This color should whatever be white, and let's put another axis in front of this white rectangle, right? This is now behind my orange one, that's why we cannot see it. But then I say, okay, if I click, I want to have a little scale up like that, right? So you remember now, I'm sure you can do that by yourself. This should be a good exercise, right? So if you scale that up with a mover, same like we did here with our scale factor, that we scale down from 1 to 0.9, right? So the same we can do here into the other direction with a mover. If this is by default it's 1. When this single tab is coming, I put here another mover to my axis, and this mover quickly runs the scaling to 1.1 and back to 1, right? And then we have that nice little click effect. I think that's also very, very important. You know, as for the user, if you click something, if you have interaction, you need to give visual feedback. This is very, very important, because and then not just visual feedbacks, also audio, you know, click sounds and stuff like that. Also very easy and quickly done in Ventuz, because it would be very boring, right? If you have a user and he has a touch screen and he's using that, and he's just clicking, but there is no feedback, right? So how can he know, hey, did I touch now that button or not? So this is a very, very important part in the active development, right? So you really want to give feedback, yeah? You want to really give interactive feedback, visual feedback, audio feedback, stuff like that. Okay, guys, I hope you learned a lot in this part 4 of our Ventuz Quick Start tutorial. And see you soon in part 5, where we will go on with animations and much more fun parts in Ventuz. Until then, see you, cheers, and bye-bye.